You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't. Chad Franzen here, one of the hosts of Share Your Voice, where we talk with top-notch law firms and lawyers about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing, delivering tailor-made services to help you accomplish your objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and make sure you're getting the best ROI, your firm needs to have a better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com. Dimitry Herman is the founder and managing partner of Herman Law. With over 20 years of experience serving as outside general counsel to growing technology companies, Dimitri's primary industry focus is on internet, advertising, social media, loyalty, and gaming sectors. He serves as a deal counsel for venture capital investments, corporate M&A, licensing and strategic alliances, and other corporate deals. He's also an adjunct professor with the New England School of Law, teaching corporate mergers and acquisitions. Dimitry, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Hey, tell me a little bit more about Herman Law and what you guys do.
Our firm was started in 2009, and we basically started the firm at the time when the market was probably at its bottom. It was, as you may remember, the debt crisis was going on, and large firms like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers were going out of business. And I had just finished reading Outliers at the time, and I was very tuned into the notion of having my 10,000 hours and what the right timing was. And the spirit of that book to me was, once you have your 10,000 hours, you need to look for the right timing to start a firm or start a business, because it's really all about connecting those specifics. And for me, 2009, I had been practicing for about just a little bit over 10 years, 12 years and I saw an opportunity in the marketplace where there was just a tremendous amount of downward pressure on costs and people, trying to survive in a large marketplace, and big firms like I mentioned going out, and also an opportunity for my clients who were trying to make ends meet and work through what they needed, which was complex legal work, but at an affordable price. So I saw that as a real unique opportunity to launch a new practice where I started basically representing clients that were raising venture capital and needed complex documentation to be prepared. A lot of companies that were just getting launched around the same time that didn't have capital because capital was scarce and they needed somebody to take a bet on them. And also a lot of transactions that were going on, both upside transactions where essentially businesses were being acquired and doing very well, and downside transactions where businesses were not doing well and there was a distress situation and they needed counsel. And so that's how we got started. And we've been in business now for almost 15 years. It's really exciting. We've worked on hundreds of transactions since that time and have hundreds of happy clients, and have just been, haven't been looking back.
Awesome. How and when did you know you wanted to become an attorney?
Oh, actually, on many occasions. So I studied philosophy and existentialism in college and economics. And I went to, I wasn't really sure, but I kind of combined all the things that I was really good at. One was, as a kid, I was really good at math. And then I realized when I got to college and started doing complex math, I wasn't really good at math, but I was really good at logic. And I was really good at figuring things out. And that's when I realized that probably law was a good path for me. And I was sort of naturally argumentative, and that was another positive. And so I went to law school, and I went to Columbia for law school. So I did really well in law school. I did well to get into law school, and started out my career as a litigator, which was, I thought initially I wanted to be an IP litigator, and I did a lot of complex patent litigation, copyright litigation, and those kinds of things. And what I realized was that I just didn't have the passion for fighting for the rest of my life. Some people, that's what they live on. And I was much more interested in getting settlements done in litigation. And all the litigators saying, you're missing out on all the fun. You just want to settle. I said, well, I think the fun's actually in the deals. And that's when I switched to the corporate side. So I've been practicing as a corporate lawyer now since about 1999, which obviously is the vast majority of my career. And I had a moment right actually at the time when we started our firm where a number of clients wanted me to sort of leave the law and become a kind of a business person, business development person. And I realized after doing it for a short period of time that I actually was doing all the legal work and all the non-legal work, and I wanted to stay being a lawyer. So it was an interesting realization because I was absolutely convinced that I didn't want to practice law anymore, and that this was a pathway to being a business guy. And within about 6 months, I realized that I actually am very happy being a lawyer. And since then, that's been the kind of the path I've been on.
Was litigation or arguing in front of a judge kind of the initial draw toward becoming attorney? I mean, that's kind of the more that's what you see on TV. That's kind of the more glamorous side.
Yeah, law school naturally, and by the way, as a professor, I can speak to this as well. Law school naturally takes you down the litigation path because that's what they teach. That's what's easier to teach. You have such a volume of information that's publicly available. You have all the decisions, all the statutes, all of the stuff, all the court filings. They're all public record. So there's just an unlimited amount of information, data that can be used for teaching. Corporate is much more difficult because, first of all, not everything is public. And even if it is, it's very complex and it's really above most people's heads. They go to law school who don't necessarily have a business background. And so law school doesn't do such a great job in explaining all that. I just naturally took that path. I mean, I'm not sure if it was because it was TV or because of what I saw or what law school taught me, but it also is an incredible rush. The one thing I will tell you, there is no better feeling. And I did some litigation work that took me into the courtroom. I was with a large firm, so large firms don't send out their junior people to do court work, but they give them experience like in pro bono. And so I did some criminal work. I did some different things that got me into the courtroom. One thing I will tell you, there's no better rush, as a lawyer anyway, that than going into a courtroom and cross-examining somebody or being in front of a judge. It's the adrenaline. You just don't get that when you're writing a contract. But you get a very different kind of experience that I think is much more lasting, which is you get to do a lot of transactions. Some lawyers may litigate for 20 years and see one trial, whereas our rush is our deal, our closing, and we see that on a regular basis every time something happens. So it's much more fulfilling. You're creating as opposed to destroying.
You kind of
In my
took us.
experience.
Yeah, sure, sure. You kind of took us through your path toward opening your own firm. Once you did, what were the early days there like? Did you have clients right away? What did you have to do to kind of get those clients? Or
Um, yeah, I had one client that was essentially kind of my, was going to be my, not only first client, but what I guess kind of anchor tenant, so to speak, if that makes sense. Who was going to? They said, "Look, we've got you. We want you to do this. We want you to be successful. We will give you a retainer and get going." And the firm that I was with, I was running the venture capital and entrepreneur group. So when I reached out to them to say, "Look, I'm making a decision. I want to go, and this is something I've always wanted to be. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I want to have my own practice." They were very supportive and said, "Look, your clients really look to you. So we will continue supporting them if they don't want to work with you, but we have every belief that they probably will follow you." And that's exactly what happened. So every client that I had basically said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be on my own, and my rates are going down, and my service is going to stay the same. And this is where I'm headed." And it didn't take long for them to convert. But I will say 50% of our clients today are actually those original clients. Uh, the people involved, and the other 50 obviously have grown. Our firm, we really don't. This is kind of a unique situation because we don't do any outbound marketing, as because we really grow through word of mouth relationships and word of mouth. I guess word of mouth advertising, so to speak. But the clients that we have today are an outgrowth of those relationships. So mostly it's founders who grow a business, sell a business. We sell that business. They stick around for a couple of years. They realize that they're really entrepreneurs at heart, and they say thanks, and they go and they start a new company. And then that company becomes another client. And then those people have other relationships, and then they make introductions. Some of those founders do very well. They start venture capital funds. They start investing. They start bringing us into those funds. That's how our fund practice grew. It's through our clients who then started to create their own family offices and VC funds, and now we represent those funds. So it was a very natural kind of outgrowth. And if you looked at a tree, I could tell you that if I'm working with client number 72, that client number 72 was brought into me by, their father and then their grandfather, great grandfather, and so forth. Eventually, it leads back to like 4 people, which is pretty amazing, actually.
Sure, sure. Did you find that maybe your business instincts are different than other attorneys that I've talked to? A lot of attorneys that I talked to say, like, I knew everything about the law. I was very well seasoned in law when I opened my own practice, but then I was kind of gobsmacked by some of the responsibilities associated with running my own firm. Was that the case for you, or was it pretty smooth?
For the most part, it was pretty smooth. It's a little bit. There's two different aspects to it. So when I started the firm, I had already been a senior partner, and I obviously have learned a lot since then. But corporate law is a little bit different than a lot of other practices. There's a fairly steep learning curve, but by the time you are 6 or 7 years out, you're pretty well seasoned. But then there's usually a moment where you realize that you don't know something because you're talking to a specialist and you just haven't seen some issue come up. And you're up for the next 3 nights freaking out because, oh my God, how did I not know this? That fear of not knowing or being aware that you don't know everything because, but for that point, you thought you were pretty comfortable, never goes away. That's when you know you've done it. Because if you realize you don't know everything, you know that you've made it, and now you just go on with that setting. Starting my own firm was a little bit different for me because the firm I was with, I ran my own group and I had some support, but because a lot of the clients were smaller clients, big institutional firms, have a lot of big teams, but I didn't need big teams. If I'm starting a company or starting a fund, you need 2 people, 3 people. So that's why it really was easy for me to kind of spin it out because I didn't need to go out and get an army of lawyers, and I didn't need a lot of technology and other things that would support. So I certainly learned a lot in some of the operational aspects, but the good news is the technology changes and continuing changes, such as all the AI stuff that's going on now. Obviously, there's a lot of focus now on AI towards law practice. All that is making it better and easier for folks like me and our firm to exist and compete with the really large firms that are out there because a lot of this can be simplified. Technology is now more affordable. The barriers to entry that used to exist don't exist anymore. So,
Uh,
mhm.
I mentioned that you are a adjunct professor with the New England School of Law, teaching corporate mergers and acquisitions. How long have you been doing that, and kind of what led you to that?
So actually, the bio you must be reading from must be a few years old,
Oh,
but
I'm sorry.
taught. It's totally fine. I am an adjunct professor at New England, but I've actually taught 3 different classes there now. For about a decade, I taught corporate M&A, and then I think that just was an opportunity to teach some new stuff. So the last 4 years, I've been teaching a class in what is basically contract drafting with a focus on intellectual property. And then this year, I'm actually teaching a new class, which is on entrepreneurship and venture capital, which is a deep dive into what legal skills you need to have to represent somebody who's starting a new business, how they document that, how they fund that, and kind of the pathway, which is, a good chunk of what we regularly do. So it's very exciting for me because I get to kind of pass that knowledge
How
on.
much how much work is there outside of legal expertise that goes into teaching these classes? Like preparation, things like
Oh, it's
that.
a thankless task. It's a thankless task. Adjunct professors don't get paid very much money. So it's, you know, after you've been doing it for a while, it's a little bit more on autopilot. But this year, I will probably sink hundreds of hours into preparing a curriculum. So between the summertime and then, the time to prepare for every lecture, it's a full semester class. So, it's quite a bit of work. Most of the stuff that I teach is going to be things that I do routinely. So that should be a little easier. But there's a lot of business information that lawyers don't normally think about. And so part of what I'm going to be teaching is understanding the business and the legal when you are representing a client, because that's what really makes a successful transactional attorney. You have to know the business side. You can't just be a lawyer.
Has there been occasions where you are in the midst of your day-to-day work with Herman Law where, I don't know, something new comes up and you're like, oh, this is like new stuff for my class?
All the time. And actually, the reason I started teaching, like kind of my point about the outliers, one of the firms I used to work for, one of the senior partners was a professor, and I really worked really closely with him, and I was amazed at how much more he knew about certain kind of nuanced things. And when we would come up, he would always have like a reference to a case or something. And it was because I said, gosh, I work with all these people and they're all senior partners, but you're the only guy who brings this up. He said, well, look, I teach this, so I have to stay on top of the trends. I have to stay on top of the law. So, we subscribe to basically, for Massachusetts and for Delaware, which are the two markets we operate in for the most part. I routinely get, every case that comes out of the court system that relates to my subject area, and I read it. Sometimes I will put a blog post or something like that on there, or write an article about it. And I've done a lot of publication locally here and then online. And same thing with Delaware, if there's something interesting, because those are the two primary markets. And that kind of is a forcing function for me. It's incredible how well something that I have taught, for example, one subject area that I've taught a lot is letters of intent and non-binding agreements, which happens all the time. Business people want to do something, they sign a simple piece of paper, and then it doesn't work out, and nobody really knows, was that really a contract or not a contract? That's something that I've been teaching for years. So I've had to take a really deep dive into like what's real and what's not. And that's been incredibly helpful when you're actually in the negotiation because you know more than the other guy.
Sure, sure. So, why don't you give us some insight into maybe what your class might learn from you or other people might learn from you? What kind of insights do you have on marketplace trends that you could share with us?
Well, that's there's a lot going on right now. I think from a kind of on the positive side, just a tremendous amount of there's been a lot of layoffs in the industries that I focus on. I focus obviously generally on tech. I do a lot of consumer products, do a lot of media. All of those industries have had some downsizing. Because of that downsizing, there's a lot of people who have left, and now we're looking for new opportunities. There's also an enormous amount of money that's sitting on the sidelines waiting for the next big thing. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in, AI being one of the obviously hot topics. There's a lot going on with that, and AI can, translating into healthcare, AI translating into software, business processing, legal. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of really new interest in those areas, which are really hot. On the flip side, valuations are way down because basically everybody's kind of looking into the long-term view and saying, I'm going to invest today. I want to make sure that my dollar today is worth, let's call it $10 tomorrow. And I don't know if that's what the case is. Right now, my dollar today might be. So there are different points of view. Companies that are much closer to that exit and that $10 number are going to have a little bit of a harder time getting that same number, or companies that are selling today, I think, are going to face a lot of downward pressure. Whereas companies that might have a longer sales cycle, longer ultimately exit, are probably in a good place now, as long as the types of investors are more long-term oriented. So we're just incredibly busy seeing a lot of new companies being formed right now. We're really busy with companies that are basically well funded and need more money because those investors are continuing to put money in. So we're seeing a lot of investments going into companies to keep them on the growth trend that they are. We are also seeing companies that are not well funded because their investors have kind of put in the capital that they need and are not really sure about where things are. Take a step back and say, go out and raise more money. We'd like to see somebody else take the risk right along with us. And those companies are struggling. So we're seeing a lot of restructurings, seeing a lot of down rounds. We're seeing a lot of people that thought they had an asset that was worth X, that's now worth a lot X. It's great legal work. It's really interesting work. It's a lot of different aspects of, you have to, in order to do this stuff, you have to understand everything from the transaction to the litigation side. How would somebody who invested 6 months ago at a higher price react to today and saying, geez, I should have known that. So you have to sort of think through the panoply of all those things. And then obviously M&A. I think there was a huge flurry of M&A for a little bit. It seems to have slowed down. it's cyclical. I think it's following I think there's a lot more going private type stuff that's to come and continue. We're seeing more of that. But that's kind of what I'm exposed to. But I'm just one lawyer. I'm sure you guys have a lot of different points of view depending on who you talk to.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you for that. Hey, I have one more question for you, but
Sure.
before I ask it, why don't you just tell me how people can find out more about Herman Law or anything else that you have going on?
Well, you can. The best thing, obviously, is just to contact me by email. And I don't know if it's appropriate for me to sort of say what my email address is,
Sure.
or you have a way to do it. So my email is the best way to reach me because that's my central inbox, so to speak. It's Dimitry, Dimitry dot Herman, Herman at Herman Law LLC. They can also find me on my LinkedIn profile, and there's a way to contact me through LinkedIn, which a lot of people, if it's inbound, or they can just go to our website, Herman Law LLC, is there information, and there's information there. And that's probably the easiest way for somebody to track me down.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, you work with a lot of fledgling attorneys, in law school and things like that. What is a maybe a tip that you might give a new lawyer that you wish that you had known prior to starting out?
A new lawyer starting their own practice, or a new lawyer just being a
Just
new lawyer?
yeah, just kind of eyes wide open going into the legal industry.
Uh, well, long term, I think any lawyer should ultimately understand, and to be successful, I think you need to, in the long run, to be really successful, find what you like to do, because that's the most important thing. Find an area of the law. If you want to stay as a lawyer, just from and stay in the profession, find something you really like doing and in the field of law, because there's a lot of variety. Litigators, attorneys do very different things than corporate attorneys. If you like, a lot of people burn out, a tremendous number of people burn out. So find the thing that makes you happy, that you can show up every day for 8, 12, 15, 18 hours and do it, because there are going to be long days ahead of you. That's the most important thing. That's just how to survive. Now, if you like doing what you do and you found it how to be successful, I mean, I think for young lawyers, the most important thing by far is attention to detail. People pay us a lot of money and they expect everything to be perfect. And the more attention to detail you are, ultimately that will serve you very well. As you progress, you'll have more people to support you. You may not be as detailed focused, but you can never leave that behind. And then, don't leave common sense behind, right? Clients want to hear that their lawyer is practical, that their lawyer understands the big picture and is strategic and oriented. That's honestly where we differentiate ourselves. As much as people like to say that, not everybody has that, and you either have it or you don't. I don't think you can totally learn that skill. I think, and that's something that you have to understand in order to be successful. Are you the kind of person that's really strategic? And then there's that role for you, or are you not, but you're very good at what you do, and then you need a strategic person to partner with to be successful. And that's an important tip.
Okay, that's very interesting and great advice. Thank you so much for that. Hey, Dimitri, it's been great to talk to you today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all your
Thank
insights.
you for the opportunity. I really appreciate you guys reaching out, and thank you again. Sure.
Yeah, my pleasure. So long, everybody. Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.